Hi, welcome to Rock the World with Kay and Michelle. We're going to be discussing on this one living with epilepsy, awareness, story, and advocacy. Now, I work with people that are epileptic, so someone might be having a seizure on my table, and I decide if we still and with the parents if we keep working, not working. And Kay has had seizures and seizure management her life, so Kay is really the authority on this because she lives with it, and that's the big difference. A lot of people are concerned that it might happen, but when it does, it's a whole different ballgame because you have medicine management as well as social skills and cognitive. Meanwhile, though, here's Kay.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla. I'm so glad you're here. Before we start, a quick note. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you notice pauses during our conversation, that's natural, we're processing or reflecting, and it's part of how we talk.
It is. So, what is epilepsy exactly? Again, I work with it. I have not had it.
Epilepsy is a neurological condition where someone has recurrent, unprovoked seizures. Basically, the brain suddenly has bursts of electrical activity that temporarily change how it works.
I know there's I think over 60 types of seizures, but do seizures look different or do you respond differently?
Yes, some are so subtle they can happen while someone seems perfectly awake, like brief staring spells, while others are full grand mal or tonic-clonic seizures. Many subtle seizures even happen during sleep, which can make them hard to notice.
How common is epilepsy?
About 1 in 26 people will experience epilepsy in their lifetime. That's over 65 million people worldwide.
Wow, I didn't know that. Do seizures always look the same?
No.
Yeah.
Seizures can vary widely. Some are subtle staring spells, others are full tonic-clonic. There are also focal seizures, aware or impaired awareness, generalized seizures, absence, myoclonic, tonic, clonic, atonic. Sensory seizures, unusual smells, tastes, or tingling.
We're going to get into what triggers seizures, but I just wanted to take a moment. Um, I'm from what I've seen too. Now, triggering seizures literally could be I've had a client that if her brother took two pieces of plastic and somehow knocked them together, like if he was playing with his Marvel figurines, his sister would go into what was called laughing seizures, where she was seizing, but she was laughing all the way through it. And so he took it as like, oh, let me do it more to get her to laugh. And she's having these back-to-back seizures. Um, and also full moons can do it, cycles that people don't realize that there's certain stresses, neurological stresses. But Kay, what are some of your triggers or what do you see?
Triggers can include sleep loss, flashing lights, stress, illness, hormonal changes, missed medications, or routine changes. Oh, no, no, mom.
Yeah, again, some people just don't know what their triggers are. They can be random. There's a very interesting story of a gentleman that had seizures, and he didn't have a seizure for 17 years and randomly ran into his ex-wife and had a seizure. So a lot of people do feel it's stress that causes them, but it's the type of stress that we're talking about. And again, to the woman that I talked about. It was just hitting two pieces of plastic. You could hit glass together, she didn't have a seizure, but just like the plastic figurines together, she would just have these back-to-back seizures, just because of that certain either sound or startle. When did your seizures start? How did your family notice?
I had seizures at birth, but they weren't recognized again until I was about 2.5. Many occurred while I was falling asleep or waking up. Studies show over 30% of seizures happen during sleep, especially focal and frontal lobe types. My parents noticed subtle signs during sleep transitions. As a baby, I slept in their room so they could monitor me. Later, when I had my own room, we used a camera for monitoring. After my breakthrough seizure in 2022, my mom slept in my room for 2 weeks. Sleep isn't just rest, it's safety and peace of mind.
Yes, and we're going to go in now about how doctors confirm epilepsy. But again, with my experience, so what Kay's describing there is what's considered lots of times as a drop seizure. So when you know how you're falling asleep, do you ever suddenly get that feeling of a drop, or especially when you wake up, that little bit of a drop? That really is an ideal time for seizures to sneak in. So it's really important that your child, if they have those type of seizures, if they're in the nap cycle still, they need to nap. You overstress them that where they need their sleep and they get overtired, you can really start creating an environment which is more open for a seizure to happen. Again, those stresses. And another thing that we're going into asking about diagnosing, I really want to stress, I'm not a doctor. I have no, this is not medical advice. Please
No.
do at least a 24-hour EEG. An EEG, as far as I know, Kay might say it's differently, is the only way that you can tell not only what the seizure is, but where it's sort of located, like a frontal seizure, because they can see the abnormal brain activity. But as she's mentioned, we go through many cycles of our life, including in sleep, what you've called here is REM, rapid eye movement area. And again, that area could be a big area for seizures. So some doctors, when they're checking for the first seizures and they're not sure, what they do is they only have like a 1 hour, 2 hour EEG.
But
I recommend that if your child really is at risk for seizures, for the 24 hours, you get to see the cycles of the brain and you can see any kind of abnormal activity because they have to catch it. So you might have, again, when you're having a seizure, let's say once every 7 years, well, you're not walking around with a monitor for 7 years looking
no.
to catch the seizure. So, and then again, I'm sure she'll also mention about catching it on videotape to showing to your professional.
Yeah.
No, they don't. EEGs only capture activity during the test. For example, after my 2022 grand mal seizure, a 20-minute EEG came back normal, but that didn't explain why the seizure occurred.
Yeah, they're not going to get much on a 20 minute EEG. And the 24-hour, and you can go up to like a 72-hour EEG where they're looking for cycles of the brain. Because they will prescribe, if they're going to prescribe medication, if they're starting to see that there is abnormal brain activity hitting even before a seizure, they want to calm down that conversation. That's another way of looking at medication. It's not to knock you out. It's so your brain doesn't get into that electrical activity that Kay was so wise and mentioned. What other things?
Diagnosis is based on a mix of history, witness accounts, and tests. EEGs record brain activity, MRIs or CTs check brain structure, and blood work rules out other causes.
This is where, like our podcast, social media is great. But what she's referring to, an EEG, that is the only way, and working with your neurologist. So even though Facebook and other modalities are great for information purposes, if you suspect at all seizure activity, the hospital and your neurologist is that way.
Yeah.
And really get the help that you need and you deserve, because seizure can be life-threatening. How did your treatment plan develop?
I will always have a neurologist. It took time to find the right medications. I was on Keppra 3 times a day and clonazepam at bedtime for years. I stayed seizure-free from 2011 until 2022. A seizure occurred in 2011 from a generic substitution of Keppra. However, in 2016, over a 5-month period, I successfully weaned off Keppra. We luckily only saw a temporary increase in my high muscle tone while weaning off, without adding medication for spasticity. In addition to this, we noticed for the first time, because I was on this medication for most of my life, that Keppra made me irritable.
And again, I'm going to interject. We're not doctors here, folks. Weaning off a seizure medication needs to be done with your doctor. It can take months, if not years, because what they're doing lots of times is when she says she's weaning off, they might be ramping up something else. So because they're never going to leave you without a medication unless they're completely taking you off the medication, which, like she says, she will have a doctor her whole life, right? So if even when people are going into CBD oils or keto diets, right? This is a very strict managed care that needs to happen. I wish we were all medication free, where she talks about a neurologist. My son will be life partners with his immunologist because he's on an immunomedication. It's just a fact of our lives. But management is management and needs to
Every
be done.
6 months.
Yeah, every 6 months. And you probably have to update EEGs and so forth. It's not just the medication.
Only if change.
Right. Now, also, again, what we were just talking about, I'd like to ask Kay if there's alternative treatments if meds aren't enough, but that's a key word, guys. If medication is not enough, there are other therapeutic interventions that can be done, but they're still under managed care. That doesn't mean don't work with neurology. I'm going to go alternative. This is not the place. First, you want to stabilize you or your child medically. That's your number one priority.
Some people use diet therapy, devices like vagus nerve stimulators, or even surgery if medications aren't enough.
Yes, I've worked with 2 clients that actually had to have hemispherectomies. They've taken out actually half the brain because the seizure activity is just too intense for that system. And you might be saying, how is that possible? It's possible. It's done. It's obviously last effort, but these seizures, especially I've known clients that have 80 a day. And that's why people say, well, how can you work on a client that has a seizure? Well, they're having a seizure more than they're not. So I keep working unless the child's in pain. Some seizures, they stop the breath. And those are dangerous because it's oxygen deprivation to the system. Those you have to pay attention to. Some of these back-to-backs can be again, you're needing the rescue meds. There's lots of different ways of working with seizures. It's about very specific managed care between you and your medical team. Do you use emergency medication, or who needs to know about it?
Yes. After my grand mal seizure in 2022, emergency medication was administered to stop it. I haven't been without it since. Family, caregivers, roommates, or coworkers knowing the plan helps everyone stay calm and safe.
Right, because we have the luxury of 911 calling for an emergency, but those delays in cares for someone with seizure activity, you might have to administer a care before those people come in and get you to where you need to be help and to sustain your care.
Not every seizure means 911.
Correct. Correct. But I was talking about when you're administering rescue care. Your plan of action is making sure, because if the rescue medicine doesn't work, you want the backup plan. Yeah, yeah. So, and you might think if you've never seen a seizure before, it might be your first response as someone not seeing a seizure before is to call 911. Someone that lives with seizures, they might just sit there and have a seizure and come back and be like, okay, because it's so matter of a fact. But again, not knowing the type of seizure, and if you're ever in doubt, help the person. And if it means calling 911 as a means to protect that person, worst case, you did trouble somebody that you didn't need to, but at the same time, you're there to take care of people. Yeah. So what are essentials for first aid now that we're talking about that?
Stay with the person, protect their head, time the seizure, and never put anything in their mouth. Call 911 if it lasts more than 5 minutes, repeats, or there's trouble breathing or injury. Afterward, place them in the recovery position.
Right. Some people will sleep hard after a seizure, like it literally knocks them out. They might be down for 24 hours because of just the adrenaline hit. They will definitely be down if rescue meds were administered, and that's where a lot of people are cautious about that. But again, keeping the person you're working with safe and seizure free is the number one goal. So that's something to be cared for. Lots of times people with seizures have emergency bracelets. And so you can tell too if there needs to be some special activity, because if you have seizures and you're diabetic, let's say, it might throw off your insulins or other medications that you're taking. And you want to monitor seizures, especially at night. Isn't that correct?
Or in the car.
Yeah. We should have a
Cameras, bed alarms, and wearable devices are very helpful, especially for sleep seizures. These, combined with family awareness, make nighttime seizures much safer.
I was going to say we should have an episodes on different safety cards to have with the person that you're with, that they could have that information. Because again, even though I've known Kate for a year, I don't know her backup plan, but I'm not with her physically. But all those kind of things are really good to know with anybody that you're with, is there anything that I need to know for your medical care? Especially, it's not about calling 911. Do we need to call the neurologist as well? To have those conversations. So everyone can be a little bit different, special depending on how chronic it is. And again, how does epilepsy affect your daily life?
In fall 2022, I had COVID-19. 1 month later, I experienced a major grand mal seizure while awake. Emergency medication was required to stop it, and I haven't been without it since. Months later, a 20-minute EEG came back normal. EEGs only capture activity if it happens during the test, so it didn't give us any indication of the cause.
Right. And her cause honestly could have been dehydration due to COVID-19, not even necessarily COVID, but it just happened to be in that area. Everyone is different when it comes to seizures, and that's the hardest thing. And lots of times, too, you have to have a little bit of patience when you're first working with your neurologist and they're trying out different medications. I know as a parent, you're expecting the first medication to work and they should know better. But really, that's why they can sometimes call it a cocktail because you're working with several different things. It could take years sometimes of finding the right combination, but just because it takes years doesn't mean you should stop whatsoever on this journey of settling.
Especially since it was over a decade.
Right, but again, it could have been hormonal. It could have been just the way the sun was shining that day. There really sometimes is no rhyme or reason for having a seizure. Lots of times it's a startle. Oh, and then there's that. So sound can startle you, a smell can startle you, those kind of things can happen. Um, but also too, living with epilepsy and the emotional effects, that doesn't mean Kay doesn't have an amazing life because she's afraid of having a seizure. She horseback rides, she's at college, she just passed all of her exams, she takes exams just like everybody else. She has managed care for the epilepsy, but she's rocks it, and that's why it's rocked the world.
A few days after the seizure, I met virtually with my college disability office. I debated sitting at my desk versus staying on the couch. When I tried to type, I started crying, and my mom had to talk for me. Here's the accommodation as worded. Student may occasionally have difficulty completing an assignment or assessment on time due to unexpected increases in disabling symptoms. To use this accommodation, students will email both the instructor and disability services as soon as they know they will be unable to meet the deadline. The additional length of time is typically 1-2 days. This adjustment may not be appropriate for every assignment, but when appropriate, should be extended and provided without a grading penalty. I didn't attempt to use the accommodation due to the way it is worded. While I kept up with my responsibilities, 2 college classes, running social media for Little Britches, etc., while with COVID, the remainder of the semester was hard.
This is also what I'd like to point out. You wouldn't look at someone like Kay or one of those 1 in 26 people might have seizures. People don't look different. They don't act differently. They don't have a certain look to themselves. So again, when someone is asking for accommodations or needs them, just say, how can I help you? It's not, this is not the time to say why. People don't go out of their way to get accommodations. They need accommodations, they're in services, and that's how you work with them. And for some people it might be they just can't travel after seizures too. A lot of people like the rooms really dark. That might be a thing that just going from your house to the bright sun, you know what I mean, is just too much on your nervous system. in seizure activity time, again, depending on the person. And so we accommodations are just that.
It's my first seizure remembering talking about.
Yeah, and probably the most famous case of seizure activities, John Travolta lost his son when he was 16. I think he was 16, Jet, due to seizure activity. Um, it's very, very serious, but it's very, very doable. Some people do have it way worse than others. It's not something to compare whatsoever. Sometimes you might compare two people with the same condition. This isn't one of those times. Really, and that's why seizures can be, again, a daunting process for a parent to work with the child's medical professionals, because they're trying to do what's best for their child. At the same time, they're sort of getting, well, we're not sure, we're going to try this. And you're thinking, well, I want to know that you are sure before you do this. No, that's just the nature of seizures.
Even 3 years later, it is serious history.
Absolutely. So what about living with epilepsy now?
It's common with cerebral palsy and carries ongoing risk. The unpredictability is one of the hardest parts. Anytime I seem off, seizure activity is part of the conversation. My emergency medication is always with me.
So we just sort of touched on this about SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And it does happen. It does happen all the way. I mentioned John Travolta. It's a true story. But this is where someone might say it doesn't matter how much money, how well off somebody is, and so forth. Nature can be very serious with this condition.
SUDEP stands for sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. Monitoring seizures, having emergency plans, and using safety measures are so important. Awareness can help prevent risks and provide peace of mind.
Right. And also what I'd like to add as a movement specialist and with movement lesson, and really, this is crucial that, especially if your child is nonverbal or unable to communicate their medical needs, like my son graduated from college, but as far as his autoimmune is concerned, I don't know if he could communicate his needs, order his medicines. He's now getting his medicines ready before his IV. He does weekly IVs, but we're step by step, we're getting there, but he's 23. Um, what you really want to look at something like this as, when you know what your child's capable of, that's where you're looking for, especially when you're having nighttime seizures or seizures that you're just not seeing, which are called subclonic. You need to be aware of your child's abilities, because if one day they can type, let's say, and then the next day they can't, that's another indication that seizure activity can be happening and you're not aware of it, because maybe it was during the night. Even with monitors and so forth, again, like was mentioned, literally I can be here. That could have been a seizure. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really, it's just a light blink, like a little bit of an absent stare, and you go, Michelle, you okay? Oh yeah, I'm fine. That literally, and I'm not saying everybody who spaces out, that's a seizure, but
No.
but again, depending on how that seizure hits the brain, that's what, so as a movement specialist, you really have to know your child's ability, especially if they're nonverbal, because that's where regression or plateauing, they might call, with abilities can sneak in, and you think it might be CP or another condition, and really you've been having seizures, and especially if you're not on medication at the time. And I see all of that happening in my practice. So what are some of the other key takeaways that should listeners remember from this?
Learn seizure first aid. Don't assume someone is fine. Respect invisible disabilities and support accommodations.
That's a really great word, invisible disabilities. Again, when a person just needs that extra help, they just need it. And you just say, how can I help you? Versus they don't look sick enough for me. This isn't about looking sick. This isn't about looking different. This is about having a medical condition that will affect you. Um, I never had seizures, but I had a condition where I was passing out randomly in my 30s. I found out I was allergic to caffeine, and literally I could be talking to you straight out, and I was on the floor the next moment. And the damage on, again, seizures might not be the seizures, but it's the fall and hitting your head, and that's where I was in harm's way with my condition. So I really hope you take a moment to
We're
listen to.
emotional.
Yeah. And also too emotional. You have to understand too, like Kay, I'm just admire her so much because she horseback rides and she's going to college and doing all of this. But when you're a little bit different, sometimes it's hard enough. And we all think we're a little bit different. I'm not picking on special needs. This is more just a neurodivergence and all of this. We're all just a little bit different. But on top of that, when you have a medical condition, and even so, you might not want to be a burden to someone, because that is what you own, right? It doesn't Seizures aren't that the kind of thing that's just laying back and go, what are you worried about? You know what I mean? It is something that's in someone's life. Just understand it. You don't have to agree with the care. I know people want to live an organic lifestyle or this kind of things. This is a type of situation where Western medicine works out really well. And we have to go with it. But that being said, I really want to, if you missed anything on this podcast, please go back and listen to it again.
Thank you for understanding.
You're welcome. But that's for everybody too. Just sometimes we need a little compassion out there and understanding. And also too, usually if you've had an active seizure, you can't drive for 3 months. So if people can drive and so forth, if you've had an active seizure, it's usually a state law that for 3 months you can't drive. And so again, if you know somebody who suddenly says, "Oh, I'm not driving right now," that doesn't mean they want to tell you they've had seizures, and maybe they don't want their boss to know. But just have a little bit of understanding if someone is going through that, it's for a medical reason, and it's okay. Be understanding.
Looking forward to our next discussion. I'd love to hear what interests you most. Should we dive deeper into epilepsy, or explore topics like immunology or dysphagia?
Absolutely, guys, please. We love doing this podcast, but we also love hearing from you. We like covering different subjects. It's what we do. Please leave your comments and your questions, anything you want to be covered, anything that has to do with this field, and we are here for you. And we appreciate that you listen. Subscribe.